everything before now we can edit out. Look, I'm delighted to welcome Emma Gleeson today. Emma, welcome, and welcome back to Cork as well. Emma, can you tell us a bit about yourself, Emma?
I'm fine and cold since I've come back to Cork, even though it's me. Yeah, hi Paddy. Thank you so much for having this chat with me today. Yeah, okay, so basically I've been outside of Cork for the last 10 years or so. Um, I have a kind of a colourful or eclectic background in engineering, education, and most recently the non-profit industry. And now I'm basically hoping to kind of enter a different space, but still involving an element of design and innovation. I've been living like across the globe, all different parts, most recently in Kenya. And yeah, I'm back in Cork, I suppose, now to start a new stage of my professional career and personal as well. So yeah, happy to be here, Paddy, today. Thank you.
Yeah, and Emma, I know you've done an invite speaker slot with the Innovation Through Design Thinking postgraduate diploma
Mhm.
at UCC. Could you tell us a bit more about your design background and what role design plays within that background?
Yeah, okay. I suppose technically speaking, my design background probably started most likely when I graduated or when I transitioned through the process engineering course in UCC. My design background definitely started at that stage. However, I suppose it wasn't very. I probably viewed it as not being very present in my kind of daily work life for a good, let's say, 10, 12, or 13 years after that. So basically, I can say that in the first like 12 or 13 years when I transitioned from engineering into education, I didn't use design as a tool or as a mindset in that time because I never felt like I was going through a process that ended in a product and I was really analyzing what was happening in between. But I joined an educational institute in 2017 that really transformed what I was doing in the design space. And I became a curriculum designer for this educational body. We were designing learning experiences, innovative learning experiences in a multidisciplinary context. So I really got an overview of how design played a huge part in different industries. Um, for me, design is a transferable mindset in any sector. Okay. It can work in tech, it can work in pharmaceutical. It basically is, I think, a huge chance to take this incredibly collaborative approach to building a product from beginning to end or answering a question from beginning to end or a challenge. So, from the educational space, I worked in that design space for quite a number of years and it was incredibly engaging. I just loved going to work every day because the great thing about working with design is every day brings another challenge. And I love working on a team, to be honest with you, and creating impact together because I really think if you work autonomously, you are limited in what you can do. When when you work as a team, you can reach far bigger accomplishments. So, what I did then in the educational space, I then transferred over to the non-profit industry when I went to Kenya and set up a non-profit in education on my own, which was a massive challenge in Kenya, which is not a very easy landscape to operate in, presents massive challenges more than most countries in the non-profit space. What we did there is we set up a non-profit, not just in basic education like numeracy and literacy, but we actually wanted to bring project based learning to communities of children and adults through a design thinking lens to encourage them to solve their own community issues on the ground, which makes life far more sustainable for them, because basically they don't have to depend on aid if they can solve their own issues. So again, all of this definitely was deep rooted in my engineering career and just my way of thinking and my way of viewing the world. I suppose, Paddy, as well, when I think of it, like the way my life has gone, particularly in the last 10 years, and living all these places like Colombia, Portugal, Kenya, Japan, India, I've been massively exposed to diverse cultures, and bringing that richness of culture and insight into my design brain is a massive benefit. I mean, all that exposure is just incredibly valuable. I cannot even begin to tell you. So yeah, I hope that gives you a little insight into where I am with the design so far to date.
Very interesting. And actually, your earlier comment really reminds me of something in my own background as well, is that funny relationship between engineers and design. And even in some cases, I think engineers are doing design without realizing it. And when you ask them, well, how do you design? They say, well, I don't really design, you know. But also maybe the other way around, that engineers maybe aren't really taught a more holistic approach to design. And you referred there, Emma, to, for you, design is a mindset. I think for a lot of engineers, design is a process, you know. Any comments about that, Emma?
Well, I think the process is there, but the process is part of the mindset. Okay. I also think we have a funny relationship as human beings with being creative. Okay. And I suppose engineers are seen as hardcore problem solvers within a system. Okay, where they specialize in certain areas, but they're not necessarily seen as creatives like architects or artists. And I think that we really need to get out of that way of thinking. Every single one of us is creative in some way, but I feel like the traditional, and I hate to say it, I'm going back to education because it is strongly related to this, and it is also strongly related to the professional environment. I feel just we're not given the time and space and resources to be creative. One thing that I suppose led to me being successful along this path is I, as an educator and curriculum designer and learning experience designer, was really involved in setting up spaces where people of different backgrounds and cultures and academic capabilities had the freedom to express themselves in some kind of creative way. And I think when you have a complex issue that you're trying to solve, it can be a complex issue, or you can also be trying to design a product. It actually technically doesn't matter which the outcome is. But I think when you have different people bringing their input in a cohesive way, you can do nothing but strengthen your outcome, you know? I think the days are passing, and finally I feel like we need to become less, we need to stop categorizing each other so much. Like, you're an engineer, so you're good at this. Like, I don't know how many times people have said to me, oh, you're a mathematician, so you're not good at languages. I mean, actually, that's the most insane outlook. Surely it's the other way around. Like, learning a language is quite like mathematical thinking from the point of view of it's algorithmic, okay, a set of steps that must be followed for the desired outcome. So, like, In fact, I taught myself Spanish when I lived in Colombia. I moved to a little local neighborhood, taught myself Spanish from scratch, and really I wouldn't have survived without it. So we have to stop putting ourselves in these little boxes and just allow ourselves to be creative. I think personally speaking, I'm somebody that's not afraid of risk. I'm definitely not afraid of failure. Anybody that knows me personally will vouch for that. And I think it's my lack of fear when it comes to failure makes me a better designer in any respect. So, and again, I suppose going back to schools, we're so used to in schools being graded in a summative way, like, you got an A or a B, or you got this percentage in a test. But like, that's not how we measure success in life. So why are we doing it in the school system, or even in third level in some institutions? We need to take a look at the way we're modeling our learning spaces in particular,
Yeah,
and to allow people to be creative.
I'm wondering though, Emma, you know, and I think a lot of what you say does resonate with me, but I wonder, for example, are engineers taught in a way
Yeah.
where creativity is actually pushed right back into the background, even though if they have a real aptitude for being more creative, etc., is it pushed there? And actually, is there a fear created of being overly creative? And did you have to refine those aspects? Because you mentioned though about maybe shifting maybe into education, for example. Did you have to try and refine that creative part, that lack of fear part, or is that one of the reasons maybe you moved more away from engineering, that you couldn't really express those as an engineer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the same for me working in the educational space in Ireland, like both spaces, engineering and teaching here, definitely quietened my creative side, let's say, or me being able to express myself creatively wasn't supported. And I think like probably most likely it's, when creativity is allowed to grow and people are allowed to be creative in a space, it gives people a voice. And I feel like sometimes we get so lost in trying to find an answer for something or trying to build a product that we forget that actually what we're doing is drowning out all the great free resources we have around us, which is creativity. And I also feel like, I think even, yeah, I can say this from even my own network of people who have done engineering, either in my class or people I know outside of that. Like, I feel like people who have entered the engineering space and felt like being creative, but felt like they weren't allowed to express it or it wasn't supported, have just gone to other areas. Of just transit, which is an awful pity. Um, so yeah, I think it's, again, look, there's all talk at the moment about our soft skills and creativity, but like, creativity is about building a whole culture and environment where people feel comfortable about expressing themselves. And being, unless you're genuinely doing that as somebody in leadership and helping to build that space, you're not going to get organic creativity in your team. That's how I feel. And again, like, yeah, I'm coming from the space where I've worked mainly in schools, but bear in mind with adults, with teachers, workshopping with teachers and with students. But the age is irrelevant. Like, as an educator and as somebody qualified in education and working in the space for almost 20 years, I can say that I do understand what it is to develop an environment where people feel free to be creative. And I'm hoping that companies are getting to that space more and more, because if I'm being honest, in the day and age of AI and ChatGPT and all these other artificial intelligence tools, if companies cannot get in behind supporting their employees to develop soft skills, people are going to be replaced by machines in the technical skill place. And that's where we're going. So I think we see how quickly all of this is unfolding. So I really feel that companies, we need to stop taking so much time to make decisions and change policies as well. And, really think about how we can support the people that are working for us and with us.
Yeah. And I agree with that completely. I've seen so many examples, and again, I'm an engineer by qualification, of people looking at maybe the likes of maybe new approaches, more human-centered approaches to design, then trying to bring it into an existing environment and really over structuring it, over mechanizing it, over systemizing it, and squeezing all that creative back out. So yes, they can then say they have maybe they're using design, more human-centered design, etc. But in effect, they're not. It's all in name. Something I'm really interested in, Emma. And I want to come back because you referred to the I suppose the inspiration you've got from moving across cultures. Can you even put into some sort of words how that has changed your own mindset in terms of how, let's say, we design for people, we design with people?
I suppose, let me try and put this into words. This is a difficult question because it's so deep, the answer to this question. The more we become culturally competent, I will say, okay, or culturally literate even, we lose the kind of judgmental approach that we may have taken to life before, and we're willing to listen more. I think that the skill of listening, which is basically attached to empathy and good listening skills. Because what happens is when you live in environments that are so diverse to the one you have been used to where you grew up, particularly, I live in sub-Saharan Africa now. But like when I came to Kenya, I've been so exposed before that it wasn't so much of a culture shock. To be honest with you, coming back to Cork is more of a culture shock in many ways. But like, let's say when I lived in Mumbai in India, you're talking about a city of like 30 million people. It is hectic. Same Tokyo, around 30 million people, but completely diverse. And I spent time in both of those cities, prolonged amounts of time in both of those cities, like pretty much with a month between them. So my head was just like poof. But like you start to listen and you start to really give it's like, I don't know, you have to personally invest so much in hearing other people's stories. Okay. I feel like when you're in your own environment, we're too busy almost talking across each other and over each other because we feel like we know so much about the space already. We're so comfortable in the space. I don't really need to know anything else about the space. But when you enter such a different environment, it's basically a matter of survival. And okay, some people go to these different environments and they exist within an expat space bubble, okay? But really, you're not going to gain much from that. If you, let's say, if you really plant yourself in the middle of local communities in any of these incredibly diverse locations in the world, you have such a rich experience for understanding the challenges of other people from a different perspective. It gives you a massive opportunity to exercise your critical thinking as well. And again, critical thinking, empathy, storytelling, active listening, all things that are just really, really, really important in the space of design and therefore innovation. Like innovation for me, I'm just not sure how people measure successful innovation. But for me, it comes from collective and multicultural teams of people that build a solution or a product together over time. The cultural piece is just so important, because even if you look at, the commercial space, a product, let me take something like Guinness. The way Guinness is marketed and used in Ireland as opposed to Africa is incredibly different. There is a different culture around that product. Now, as globalization occurs, it is more and more and more important for us to understand what's happening over there. And yeah, I feel like, and I feel like we have to let go a little bit. We have to be comfortable about onboarding people from other parts of the world into a team when we're launching a product at their market.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's great to engage Emma Gleeson about Kenya, but I am an exception to the rule. The majority of foreigners, let's say, living in Kenya are not as embedded in the culture as I. And I know that because I lived there for the last 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. So again, rather than just relying on outliers like Emma Gleeson to appear once every blue moon, we have to start bringing aboard people from that culture, and our communication piece just has to improve. I hope I've answered the question.
No, it's a beautiful answer, actually, and it reminds me, I was involved in an exchange recently with someone that would advocate that he would be an expert in sense making, and what amazed me was that a lot of his own personal approach is actually judgmental, going in and judging how people make sense of their own environments where they themselves live, their own ecosystem, on maybe religious, the fact that maybe their beliefs don't cohere with scientific beliefs and all this. And I felt it was so limited. You know, if you really want to come up with solutions that work in someone else's area, you need to understand how they see the world. Whether you accept it or not is a different matter.
It's irrelevant. Yeah,
it's irrelevant. Yeah.
Paddy, let me tell you something as well. I think innovation and creativity is also driven a lot by necessity. And when you're in spaces like India and sub-Saharan Africa, there is a huge necessity in those locations for a lot of things. And let me tell you this, sub-Saharan Africa and India are the most creative locations I have ever been. When I say sub-Saharan Africa, I've been to about 8 countries down there. And because people struggle to survive, because mainly the political and therefore economic environment, let's be honest, that's the main reason. It's incredible what people will do to succeed. And the mindset, there's a lack of complacency that I think we have here. Because I think, I'm not saying there are no creative people here. Of course, there are lots of different creative people here. But again, are we allowed a space for creativity? I'm sure there are far more creatives under the surface bursting to get out. But I feel like in those environments, the space is already there out of pure necessity. You know, I remember when we went to India and we were designing a learning experience. Now, the group that had been there the year before, they took a totally different slant to the learning module than what we did. So when we went in, we said, it feels like what we're trying to say here is we're coming in as this incredibly elite traveling school into India, and we're going to show the Indians how brilliant we are and what we're doing. And then one of the teachers says, but this is crazy. One of the teachers in our team said, this is crazy. We need to change this whole mindset of coming into India and trying to teach Indians what we're doing. Because India is one of the most incredibly dynamic, diverse, and vibrant, and creative, and innovative places in the planet, and has always been. Okay. How now are we going and telling them what to do? So we changed the module from the perspective of we're coming to you to find out how you as a culture, or combination of cultures, because it's so diverse, how this has led to your success. So it was beautiful, and the outcome was amazing, and the students just learned an incredible amount from it.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, in fact, just before well, we recorded this session, I was looking at the idea of there's the idea of epistemology, but epistemic colonization, it was called, where we go in and impose our view of the world on other cultures, and those cultures having these rich legacies. So, and that brings me to a question, Emma. When you're back in Cork at the moment for a while, when you come back, do you realize, oh my God, I've been absorbing a lot of these cultures I've been experiencing remotely, and I'm only realizing when I come back to Cork how much I've absorbed, let's say, different cultures compared to maybe what my friends that are still back in Cork, my family back in Cork, would believe or behave, or etc.
It's funny that when I come back, really the only thing that ties me to the people around me is nationality. I've totally changed, as we do, and as we are meant to do. If I was the same now as I was 10 years ago, surely that means I haven't had any growth, which is seriously worrying. And I think it's really important for our brains to be trained to change our mindset and our outlook on things. That is the concept of critical thinking, which has been around since ever. Yeah, I feel like I just view the world in such a different way. And I have to say, as a person, I feel more calm internally and probably externally. Like I would say I'm going through a massive change right now. I am kind of changing I hope to change my kind of design pathway from the education nonprofit space into kind of more commercial side. So I'm navigating that change at the moment. We're also transitioning from sub-Saharan Africa back to Ireland with a small baby, and my partner is Kenyan. And yeah, like there's so much change. People around me are saying you're crazy, you're mad, but you're incredibly strong. But to be honest with you, the Emma of 10 years ago, who was far, 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 far less exposed, would not be able to cope with the same change and transformation, if I'm being honest. You just learn to take life at a different pace as well. And that pace can change. Sometimes it's quicker, sometimes it's slower. But yeah, overall, me as a person, I feel like a total outsider in many ways, just from the point of view of, and I don't mean that in a negative way either. That shouldn't have a negative connotation attached to it. But I just feel like, and it is the same when you move to any place, irrelevant if you've lived there or before or not, because it has changed.
Yeah. But I think, Emma, and I've noticed something, and maybe I'm off, and tell me if I am, but I've a feeling when you've come back, the difference between maybe now and 10 years ago was, I think a lot of us walk down the street and we assume we know how everyone is thinking in front of us because they're the same as us. Yeah. Whereas I think when you've come back, there's less of that assumption, even if they're the same color face, if they're the same from the same area, you don't assume everyone is the same. Is that a fair assumption? Because of that exposure to different cultures, and maybe your brain now is more, I suppose, plastic in terms of wanting to understand the individual. And just because an individual maybe shares certain characteristics doesn't mean they're the same as ourselves.
Yeah, it's like the problem is in a localized environment, what we can often do is, make assumptions that we know what's going on with another person, and very often we don't. And that, I suppose, comes from as well, we often think we know people's strengths and challenges, and we don't. So yeah, I feel like I'm looking at the world differently, at people differently, and different doesn't mean bad.
Mm.
Different means I'm kind of celebrating that, wow, I'm coming back to Cork. Things are way different. It's a new challenge. If I was slipping back into the same Cork as 10 years ago, yeah, I don't know, would I
Mm.
would I be so happy about that?
No, no, and look, it's
We're
hypothetical.
meant to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
We're meant to challenge ourselves continuously.
Mm.
And I'm not, actually, where I'm not comfortable is being complacent. I don't
Mm.
like being complacent about things.
Mm. Mm.
It's a level of comfort for a lot of people, yes, but for me, I struggle with it. I want to evolve. I want to grow. I want to help other people to grow, change, transformation. And it doesn't happen in a day. All of these things should be incremental changes. It's not just a switch that can be flicked, it's a continuous process.
Mm. And Emma, I've heard you saying, I think you said it to our Innovation Through Design Thinking at UCC group as well. This idea of we need to be able to bring ourselves to our job. We need to be able to bring ourselves to our role. We need to be able to bring ourselves to our organization. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean when you say that?
Again, the thing is, okay, thankfully, I think the professional world in general is becoming a little less rigid. Maybe the pandemic had something to do with that. You're on a video call, like here, Paddy, yourself and myself in the beginning of the session, and my 11-month-old is squeaking upstairs.
Yeah.
And you're like just telling me, don't worry, this happens all the time. So like, there's an element of our personal lives that has been unveiled in a way because of the online work situation, and I think there were lots of funny things on social media about that over the last
Mm.
number of years. But yeah, for me, again, this isn't, I have to say, this isn't just in recent years, but in general, I think I get so much out of my career when I put more of my own personality into it, because it feels like I'm being personally rewarded. Okay. And it just feels like a personal investment. And I think when people feel personally invested in their jobs and they feel like they've a bit of a voice and they can bring some of their personality, I just think you get way more out of your team.
Mm.
That's the way I look at life. Okay, I know some of my colleagues and friends may not necessarily agree with that, and they have two very rigid and separate lives, like the personal over here, the private over here, or the professional over here, and they don't really allow for an intersection of the both. But that doesn't work for me, and again, I just don't think it's going to work going forward, because I think us as a human race, we need to start developing and exercising and refining our soft skills. And that does require you to bring some personality to the table. When we're talking about communication, when we're talking about critical thinking, creativity, all of these different aspects of the soft skill world, they require us to put some of ourselves in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How can you see something
Mhm.
from another perspective through a critical thinking lens, let's say? How can you see something, or how can you be empathetic towards somebody else's view of the world if you're not putting yourself into it in some way as well?
Mm.
I think we need to start addressing that and maybe questioning how much investment are we putting into our professional lives? How
Yeah.
much intersection are we allowing for the two?
And actually, I think, Emma, the problem is when we go in that door, across that threshold, and whatever that threshold means, it might mean differently. But let's say across the threshold each morning when we go to work, we have to put on a mask that means we're homogenizing everyone. Everyone needs to turn up nearly as a company person, and behave in a certain way, think in a certain way, except none of us think the same way. None of us really want to behave in the same way. And I think you're right that we don't allow that real diversity, even though we might again have on paper diverse people, though different genders, different maybe sexual persuasions, different religious beliefs, all that. But actually, we're forcing people to homogenize, to turn up in a certain way, and we're not getting, as you say, those intersections at all. And actually, that's a big argument I have against the way critical thinking has been taught a lot. It's been used a lot. It's nearly thinking in a very mechanistic way, except critical thinking is about diversity of thinking.
Of course, yeah. Like it's like you can't teach people. It's not teaching people about what to do. It's modeling for them how to do it. You need to model, and it's not about forcing it down people's throats either. There was something else there now I wanted to say. Yeah, like I actually think that I would attribute a lot of my success in the classroom to me bringing my personality. Like I was a physics and math teacher, like, okay, they're fairly rigid old subjects that the majority of people don't exactly like, particularly mathematics. But like I allowed for, first of all, when I taught it, I allowed for the whole real life application. But apart from that, you throw in the odd story about, the time I was living in Australia, or sometime I learned like a good life lesson, you need to bring the personality. It keeps the kids engaged. If it's just too technical and, as I said, if you're going into the classroom with a mask on, which does happen often in a lot of learning institutions, it doesn't work. You can't engage other human beings effectively for a long amount of time with that approach, is what I think.
Yeah, and of course, Emma, if we're turning up and people are turning up in the classroom with a mask on, how can we then really, what's our role models? Are we to allowing the people that we're supposed to be teaching or instructing, whatever, to actually be themselves, and that we embrace diversity, etc. So I think it's a really interesting conundrum. And also, Emma, I know I've heard you talk a good bit about feedback, the importance of sort of constructive feedback, the importance of reflection, the importance of self-assessment. Can you tell us, just with the few minutes we've left, a bit about that? I know you talk a lot about those actually, so we're probably not going to do justice in the next few minutes, but maybe a quick overview.
A very quick overview. Okay, first of all, feedback. Well, actually, one of the comments that was made in that session with the students from the Design Thinking for Innovation class in UCC was they felt like that feedback always came from the top down. For me, feedback is a two-way system, okay? Again, when I was in designing learning spaces for students, I design something, or I give a first draft of a design, like, involve the students in the design because I'm doing it for them. So surely they are the users. Let's look at a user experience lens. They are the users. So surely I need to test my prototype with them. And then they would give me feedback in the same way that then when they went through or used the learning experience, I would give them feedback on how they were undertaking different parts of the challenge. It has to work both ways. If it's just top down, it just becomes a nonsensical, I suppose, narrative where the people on the bottom feel like they're not actually growing. They don't see the point. They don't see the justification in the exercise. So feedback is critical, but it is also done. It's the delivery of the feedback, and you have to be very intentional about how you're giving the feedback. We've done lots of workshops with an American psychologist on this a number of years ago. He was fantastic. Like, totally changed the way I approached giving feedback to people and how I interpreted the feedback given. But it has to be a two-way system. If it's going one way only, it doesn't make sense. That's my opinion. Reflection, we also talked about this. reflection should happen throughout any process in life that we're going through. Like this move that I'm currently doing, the different pathways that I'm pursuing, both personally and professionally in this move, are changing over time because I'm looking back at the problem that I'm trying to answer and I'm reflecting, am I being successful in answering this problem? And if we don't reflect on what we're doing on a continuous level, I don't see how we can be very successful with achieving our goals. Like I think a lot in schools, and I'm not sure is this just in Ireland or is it globally, but we're taught often that reflection is a one-time thing at the end of a process. That's not how reflection works if you want it to be effective. And I also think that maybe in Ireland, culturally, reflection isn't a big piece of our culture. And we need to look at that. But again, when we become more and more diverse, which we are becoming, it's a fantastic thing to see. Reflection will be organically built into the culture over time, I think. Self-assessment, will I give it one last lash?
And just before you get to self-assessment, Emma, it's and I really I like the idea that maybe some cultures are far more likely to reflect more deeply. I think definitely in this country, my experience working with lots of people is that we reflect maybe at a surface level, though we'll describe what happened, who did what, when, maybe even how, but actually a lot of us don't really introspect. We're not very comfortable going deeper into, well, what does this mean for me? How should I have done things differently? I don't think it's funny. I don't think that happens. I think sometimes maybe cultural, where we because we didn't ever have. Maybe again we were colonized. We also with a very powerful church. We maybe in some cases we felt our opinion of ourselves didn't matter.
We didn't have a voice. It's more than being colonized because, like, I live in Kenya, my partner is Kenyan, and the Kenyans are incredibly reflective, actually. And they have a very similar colonial history to Ireland, incredibly similar. So I don't think we can attribute it to colonization. Okay, maybe that does add to it somewhere, but I think it's probably more focused on definitely the church, which is, I suppose, another form of colonization in ways people might say. I mean, that's not my own personal opinion, but it's still like a kind of a greater body acquiring a population of people and what they do. But yeah, with the church kind of stuff, I think really we were not given the room to think about why we made the choices we made, and we were told what to learn, what to say, what to do. That comes from the education system as well, though. In schools, we teach people the content to learn. This is what you learn. You learn this and this and this and this. We're not teaching people why or how they should be doing it, and that's the problem. So,
I heard someone saying recently, and I can't remember who it was, Emma, but they said in some countries we've replaced the colonists with the sort of the religious part, the Catholic Church, etc. And we've now replaced the Catholic Church with the corporations, that we're all maybe praying to the corporations, that we're all maybe being guided by the corporation. And some would say actually we, even though we now think we're more liberated in lots of ways, we still don't really have a voice because we're really being guided by the commercialization of products, services, etc.
Well, like, it's like this. I suppose it's down to basic needs, Paddy. Who's putting food on our table? I mean, when the British left and the Catholic Church was present, the Catholic Church were really helping to put food on the tables of people in this country. When the Catholic Church, I suppose, when they lost a lot of their power due to various things that had happened along the way, You get the likes of Apple Computers, Google, and all these other fantastic, fantastic companies that gave great prosperity to the country and jobs and everything. But again, it's now them putting food on the table. So, I mean, it's just a cycle, I suppose, really, isn't it?
I think that's one we'll have to keep for the pub or something. We'll have a good conversation around that.
Absolutely.
So maybe to finish on self-assessment, Emma.
Self-assessment, again, like, I think we need to be, the reflection piece is really important for the self-assessment, I suppose. We've been assessed in the educational institutions and also the workplace very often in a summative way, in a graded way. But I feel like, again, when you get like things like constructive feedback and almost descriptive and deep feedback as to your progress regarding certain challenges or skills, we can then dig deeper into our own assessment. Like, again, let me give you a school example just because of everyone. It's easy and it's tangible for everyone to understand. Like, this student got 80% in their French test. 80% of what?
Mm-hmm.
What are we assess? So therefore the learner or the user or whatever we want to call the candidate can't internalize what they did or their growth within that specific area, does it, am I making sense?
No,
Like,
you are. Yeah.
descriptive and formative feedback is very important for us then to be able to self-assess where we're going and how to get there. And it's only when people have received like high quality feedback over time, and this is again what I've seen personally, but again, it's my opinion. When people are used to receiving this constructive feedback, high quality over time, they can then begin to process how they can grow themselves and in what ways. So, like, again, reflection, you have to be able to reflect on your journey in order to understand your growth and how to grow further. So those kind of ones are linked together.
Yeah, and I know as well, Emma, and we'll definitely finish on this one, but that you are a big advocate of this idea of always maintaining your portfolio, to know always, whether it's for yourself, being able to look back, look forward, but for being able to show others. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, yeah, again, we brought this into our own learning space a number of years ago for the learners in our program. And like, the justification of having a portfolio is it's evidence of growth and learning. Simple as that. Because of outside of test scores and certificates, like Paddy, you just got a certificate in how to use ChatGPT, for example. It doesn't tell me anything about your ability with that tool. It doesn't really. It's more of a box ticker. Show me with the portfolio what you've done. So I think it's incredibly important for all of us to be keeping portfolios. I suppose the big debate, and you and I have had this discussion before, Paddy, is how do we document our portfolios in some kind of e-learning LMS, like learning management system, or is it a tool like Canva? Can we use Instagram as our portfolio? Because again, I suppose this links back to the personality. It's funny, and the creativity. People have space on social media, on their Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever the case may be. They feel like they have the space and the voice to showcase creativity and their personality. So it's very, 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 very interesting that social media can be used as a really effective tool to capture somebody's personality and therefore a portfolio of what they've done. I think we need to use social media tools a little bit more with the professional slant, and LinkedIn the same. But yeah, I think a portfolio going forward, exams, like when you look at the way second and third level institutions are nervous about the emerging AI tools, it's because they're not assessing in the correct way, in my opinion. Tests are a thing of the past. We need to be looking at people's portfolios that show how they've done things, not what they've done. Yeah, we can see the what, but the how. Portfolio shows how we've addressed these different areas.
Yeah, and of course, as you said earlier, a portfolio isn't just for people maybe at a learning stage in their lives. We should be learning all the way through, but it's showing on a daily basis, a weekly basis, monthly basis, how we're evolving. So when we do go for maybe a role, that it's literally there. You have it now, and you're not trying to put it together. You're maintaining. So Emma, where can people find out more about you?
Where can people find out more about me? On my LinkedIn poddy, or my email, or my website, feiafrica.org. That's will show my non-profit project.
How do you spell that, Emma?
FEI Africa.org.
Africa. Yeah,
But
feiafrica.org.
I think really, if you want a glimpse at Emma Gleeson now, on what is it, the 8th of May 2023, I think my LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me, or just look at my activity or anything I've done, or the establishments that I've been connected to. And yeah, I'm very excited to broaden my network. So please, anybody who's listening to this, feel free to connect.
Yeah,
Thanks, Padraig.
and it's also a lot of fun. I know, a lot of your, and I think it even comes across here. You're a fun person naturally, Emma, but also I think you try and bring that fun into your professional roles as well, which is really, really nice. Emma, thanks so much.
Thanks, Padraig. Thanks so much for the opportunity to have the chat. Take care.